So in the last video, we had a chance to be introduced to the Bezier curves and vector artwork in general. Now we're going to go ahead and take that to the next step. Now to begin with here, we have to understand that the way that the pen tool works is basically connect the dots. So if I click, 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 and then I go back to my original point, you'll see my icon changes and I get a little 0 next to that. And that's basically telling me that this is going to close that shape. So now I've got 4 points, and if I come over here to my shape selection tool, I can begin to manipulate these points like so. Well, there's also sort of these primitive shapes right next to the pen tool. There's the rectangular shape, which basically does the same thing. It creates 4 points, which if I choose the shape selection tool, I can manipulate just like so. So obviously, it's a little bit faster if you know that you're just looking for a rectangular shape to use a rectangular shape tool than trying to draw it with a pen. This is also true if you look under the rectangular shape tool, you'll see the oval shape tool. And I should also point out that whether you have the pen selected or one of these primitive shapes, they're all going to be available to you here in the toolbar, along with this other icon, which is the quick curve, which we'll come back to later. But the rectangular shape, the oval shape, and the pen tool are all basically tools that we're going to use to do the bulk of our vector work. So I'm going to go ahead and pull down the oval just like so. And you can see here that this is, again, made up of 4 points. 1, 2, 3, and 4. What's interesting, though, is if we click on that point, you can see that we can adjust this using pre-made handlebars. And these pre-made handlebars are basically giving us magnets already in place that are deforming the line between the dots to create the arc that makes this an oval. So we could, of course, grab these handlebars and grab the magnets at the end of the handlebar and begin to manipulate that line and create interesting deformed shapes from those lines. So that's, of course, one of the really interesting things about working with these Bezier curves is how you can get all these very interesting organic blobby shapes from just 4 simple dots. You can create some very, very complex organic shapes that would be very complex to try to freehand draw that out and get nice smooth lines. It just wouldn't happen. This is basically the same thing in traditional media as working with a French curve. We're basically creating our own French curves using the Bezier curves instead of using a template or a French curve to create the curve. So it's a lot more flexible in the computer than it is in the real world. And that's something that we'll come back to later on. What's really interesting, though, is that if we click on that line segment right there between, you can see that I'm able to now manipulate that line segment directly, and the handlebars will deform to adjust to whatever it is that I'm trying to do. Now, of course, it will only adjust within certain parameters, meaning those handlebars will only deform in a straight line. They won't bend in random directions, meaning that if I move it like so, and I go back over here and I work on that, there we go, got it. You can see that that's only going in a straight line to infinity. It's not going to allow me to bend this line over like so in order to get a new line. So that's something to be aware of. It only goes in straight lines. However, this is something that can be useful when you're trying to get a particular effect and you're pretty much happy with the placement of these lines and you just want to adjust the curve slightly. Just directly grabbing it instead of trying to manipulate it with these can be an easy way of doing that. Now, in addition to working with these guys, if I go ahead and I move this guy over, and actually, you know what I'll do here? I'll just delete these 3 and we'll start brand new, fresh. Come up here to the oval tool and we'll just create an oval and then we'll create another oval. Now these 2 ovals are overlapping, and what you can see here is that we basically have 2 black strokes that are intersecting. However, if you come up to the property bar, you'll see that we have a stroke color, which we currently have active, but we also have a fill color. And if I go ahead and turn that on, and then I go ahead and change the fill color to something like white, what you see when I drag this out is that the fill of this particular shape is now obliterating the 2 shapes that are behind it. And if I change this to another color, something that'll be a little bit more easy to see, you can see exactly how that works. So this is effectively hiding whatever's behind there. Now, of course, I can adjust the layer stacking order so that these are arranged in different ways than what we are currently seeing, and that can be useful. Now, if I choose the shape selector and I click on the fill, I'm able to manipulate the shape directly by simply clicking on the fill, and now it selects all the points at once. And if I want to manipulate a particular point, I just click that point and I can manipulate the point itself. But if I want to move the whole shape, I just click on the fill and now I'm able to move the shape. So you can begin to see how powerful these guys are in terms of making complex artwork out of very simple shapes. You can just stack them using the layer stacking order, and then you can manipulate the shapes basically in whatever way you want to, controlling the stroke and the fill. And that's only the beginning of working with these vector shapes in Painter.